Great, as I mentioned, these are our partners. We work with SDG Today, we work with ESRI, Mission 4.7, World Climate Teach-In, Arizona State University, and of course we, Jasmine, Hain and I are from the Center for Sustainable Development, Earth Institute, Columbia University, and we run this program called Eco Ambassadors. Today's session, we will be focusing on narrating local stories through the lens of the Sustainable Development Goals. So we will go over the Sustainable Development Goals, but if you are unaware of what SDGs are, feel free to look up on the internet and see what SDGs mean and what SDGs are. They will be essential for our storytelling component as we go forward. Week 1, we will be doing, this is week 1, today is the week session. We will go over the objectives of the Eco Ambassadors program, goals of what the summer program will be, a recap of 2021, review of creative writing tips by our esteemed guest, Jahnavi Bhatt, and creative writing exercises with Odessa Hott. We will, if you have not seen this already, last year we had poetry sessions by Dr. Nidhi Thakur. So please feel free to watch those poetry writing tips because they are very good, again, linked to what we are doing here. Poetry writing is another set of skills that we can have, which will be helpful for our session today. And eco radio messaging by Brighton. So those two are our homework that we had given. I will send the links again. I think my colleague Hain has already shared the links. If not, I will also share. If you haven't seen it yet again, I will share the links again, just so that you will also get to learn about eco radios and messaging as well as poetry writing. Great. Just a bit about Eco Ambassadors. What do? We are at the Center for Sustainable Development, Columbia University, and I think all of you who are here are Eco Ambassadors. How? Because you have by going to school, learning about the Sustainable Development Goal, learning about climate change, you are learning science education. You learn science as a course in your school. And you are also eco advocates. If you are interested in storytelling, if you are interested in learning about the SDGs, you become an eco advocate because you are trying to use your skills to talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, not just in school but also in with your families, with your communities. So together with the science training and eco advocacy part, we are trying to work on sustainable development, not at the country level or at a global level, but also in our homes, in our schools, workplaces, local institutions, wherever you go, you will be an eco ambassador by learning science and by also doing eco advocacy. So today's workshop is very much in alignment with the eco advocacy part because we will be learning about storytelling, right? Summer goals very quickly. I will not bore you with all the details, but what we will be doing in July, we will be learning about storytelling. We can also, this is a very good exercise to learn about GIS, geospatial mapping, on how we can use where we are located and how we can plot where we are located on a map to include it as a part of the story. So we will be learning about that. In August, the sessions will continue. We have 5 weeks of these sessions, so make sure you attend all of them because all of them will be critical to understand the entire picture. We will be having this at different times, so if the timing doesn't work, I apologize because we are catering to many people who are joining from various different places. So you can definitely see the recording if you miss any of those sessions. We will be doing storytelling, we will be doing story maps, which is also another special feature. We will also be learning about the Sustainable Development Goals, and then we will also be finally publishing your story maps on our website. So super exciting. And in September, maybe some of you will get a chance to present your story maps, your stories at an international conference for sustainable development. And many people can hear about what you have written and what your stories are. So consistently work on those. And I think it will be wonderful to hear about what you are interested in as we go along. You will get to learn about many different tools, sustainable development goals. You will get to learn about this cards called Turn It Around cards, and they are very interesting to learn about climate change. You'll also become a part of a network of youth who facilitate exchange of ideas and brainstorming climate related ideas. You'll learn about GIS, which is Geographic Information System Mapping. You'll also learn about real-time data, climate storytelling, and to create lesson plans to teach your peers. Right now, we are teachers, but we can also teach our siblings. We can also teach each other. You can teach the adults. You can teach us. So many possibilities are there. Today's session, as I mentioned, is about creative writing tips. We have two esteemed guests who will be who are with us, who I get to learn a lot from. So I've invited them to teach all of us. We are all in this together, and we are all learning about creative writing. And so my friend Jahnavi Bhatt is here. Jahnavi is a freelance writer, and she really has ways with words. You know what it means? It means that she makes things so interesting and so compelling. Sometimes I give her long things to read, and she cuts it down and makes it really interesting to read. So I think that is a skill that special people have. So we've invited Jahnavi. Thank you, Jahnavi, for being with us here. So I'll just over to you to share your tips and share all these ideas on how we can make our stories appealing and interesting, and what are some of the things that we need to keep in mind to write a story. So over to you for your presentation, Jahnavi.
Thank you, Radhika. And it's so nice to be here with all the participants. And I'm really looking forward to the session. I think the Eco Ambassador program is really good. And this year, you're going to work on storytelling, which is very important because you need to get your message across in a nice way, create impactful stories, and, inspire people to take action. So, okay, let's get to the Radhika. How do I start my?
Should I share it, Jahnavi, and then you can let me know,
Yeah.
or you can do this
Yes,
from?
okay. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Great. Yes, you can see.
Okay. So my presentation is called "Don't Tell Me Words Don't Matter." So this is from a famous speech by President Obama in one of the Democratic conventions that he gave. When somebody had made a comment that he gives very well-rehearsed speeches that don't really amount to much. So this is the speech that he gave in response. Radhika, I'm not getting the... Okay.
Want me to change it to the next slide?
I'm pressing the arrow for the next slide, but yeah.
Yeah, so actually, if you share it from your screen, then you will be able to move it down. Should I stop sharing and you share it?
Okay, I'll have to start on my screen. Just a minute.
Yes. I see Betsy is also joined. Thanks for joining, Ms. Freeman. Perfect. And make it big. Yeah. So make it, yes.
Yeah, just a minute. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's what he says.
But understand this argument about words not mattering. The most important thing that we can do right now is to re-engage the American people in the process of governance, to get them excited and interested again in what works and what can work in our government, to make politics cool again and important again and relevant again. Don't tell me words don't matter. I have a dream, just words. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, just words. We have nothing to fear but fear itself, just words, just speeches. It's true that speeches don't solve all problems, But what is also true is if we cannot inspire the country to believe again, then it doesn't matter how many policies and plans we have. And that is why I'm running for President of the United States of America. And that's why we just won 8 elections.
So words do matter, you know. What you write, how you express yourself can inspire people to action. It can influence their thoughts, like you're going to be writing stories on climate change and, you know, work for eco-advocacy in your communities. So what you say, how you design your campaign, the stories you tell and how you tell them are going to matter. You know, so you have another example of Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream. You know, what a beautiful speech, one of the most admired speeches of our time. And the way he uses words, the refrain, I have a dream, that, you know, keeps repeating throughout the speech, it emphasizes something. You know, it's a call to action to end racism, to invite more people to join the civil rights movement. And it did have an impact, and it continues to inspire people over the ages. So, you know, your writing, how you present, how you communicate is going to be very important. So there you go. Any Harry Potter fans here? So words are very powerful. You know, they can be your greatest ally and they can be your worst enemy. You know, you can have a speech like Martin Luther King's that inspires people to action. Or another good orator was Adolf Hitler. But his words, you know, how he used them was to spread his agenda of hatred. Or recently, more recently, as you must be seeing in the news, the January 6th hearings, right? So how you can inspire people either to do something productive, something constructive, inspiring, or storm the Capitol. So words are very powerful, and you need to use them judiciously. Now, what is creative writing? You know, it's a way of discovering yourself, who you are, your own thoughts, feelings, how you interpret the world around you, you know, and how do you use that understanding, both of yourself and the world around you, to create and communicate it to others in a way that creates a lasting impact. So we have this other speech. Drawing on all the US presidents and leaders in my presentation. So you have President Kennedy. Now imagine if he said, don't expect your country to do everything for you. You must also be willing to work hard and willing to work for it, what you want yourself. You know, these words in his speech, if he had used them, would we still remember it after all these years? What did he say? He said, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. So what is it that makes this very memorable? It's the way he has crafted this sentence, you know, express this thought, and the play of words, ask not and ask what you can do for your country. So the juxtaposing these two phrases, and it really makes, I mean, it's short, the brevity of it and the beautiful way that it is crafted is something that people remember all these years. Now, when you start writing, you know, what is one of the most important things that you need to draw on when you start writing? It's your imagination, especially for fictional writing or creative writing. Both. So imagination is very important. So here he says, you know, you don't need television when you have imagination. So imagination, in your imagination, anything is possible. You know, there are no limits, and it helps you, it takes you away from reality, but it also helps you cope with reality. You know, sometimes it's an escape into this world of fantasy, as you see, like Harry Potter, right? The Harry Potter books that are there. So it's not like real, you don't have the muggles and the, you know, wizards and all, but it's a beautiful world that you go into. It's somebody's imagination, and it opens up something in the readers itself, you know, in the readers also. So which are some of the fantasy books that you really like? All the people, Radhika, can you Anyone?
Any
Or some
fantasy book?
examples of, where imagination helped you with something, or, books, fantasy books, or books that employ, like, you don't really have, when you're growing up, you have these books of a hippo going to school. I mean, that's not something that happens in real life, but it's just something that makes a story more interesting and kids can relate to it. And sometimes the best of lessons are taught through these, stories. So anyone, any favorite books like?
Percy Jackson, Janvi in the chat, and Harry Potter.
Yeah. And
Goosebumps.
Lord of the Rings, the Berenstein
Mhm.
Bears. My kids love that. So, all right. Sometimes we are stuck for ideas. A lot of kids, like, sometimes when I'm teaching them, I don't know what to write. Like, where do these ideas come from? What should I write about? So I always feel that ideas are everywhere around you. It's like in your own life, the people around you. When you travel, you come across people, you come across stories and monuments, and so there are these stories everywhere. You visit museums and you want to know, oh my god, like when you see this mummy in a museum in New York, you want to know what was life like back then. So this is how you can just imagine and you can come up with a story. You have encounters with people, right? You may meet somebody very interesting, a sports personality, or somebody who's an activist, and you want to know about their life. Maybe you're inspired to write about them. Um, Newspaper articles where you learn about events happening around the world, and how life is so different for somebody across continents. And books are a great way of, you can be inspired by other authors. You don't have to emulate them, but you can be inspired by them. They may spark some thought process within you reading. So reading is very important. So I always say readers are leaders. To be a good writer, you should read, and read all kinds of, read newspaper articles. You can read even labels on cereal boxes. You can read hoardings, brochures, emails. Every kind of writing has a different style. You need to have a love for reading, and it will help you express yourself in a better way. So can any of the participants, especially the eco ambassadors, tell me about their favorite authors and what do they like to read? Anyone?
Mine is Ruskin Bond.
Oh, Ruskin Bond. Oh yes, I really like Ruskin Bond. In fact, I met him once. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sartaj?
I enjoy J.K. Rowling. She wrote the Harry Potter books. She has
Yes.
an interesting way to write the books.
Very, very interesting. And Samara?
I have two authors actually. One is J.K. Rowling and Sudha Murthy.
Yes. Oh, yes. She's very inspiring. Very, very inspiring. Good choice. Yeah, Sartaj?
And my favorite authors are R.L. Stein and Ruskin Bond.
Yes. Ruskin Bond. Yes. Have you read Room on the Roof?
No, ma'am, I haven't read Room on the Roof, but I have read other books of Ruskin Bond.
Awesome. Yeah, he's really good. Okay. Who else? Azan?
Ma'am, my name is Simsha. In mobile, it's coming. In this device, it's coming.
Okay. Sorry.
Ma'am, my favorite author is Roald Dahl.
Yes, Roald Dahl. Yes, my sons as well. So, how to, one tip that I give a lot of my students and is to keep a diary. How many of you all keep a journal or a diary? You need to write about your day. That's great. That's a good habit to have. So you need to write about your day, not just that, oh, I got up, I went to school, I went for my classes, I came home, went to sleep. Not like that. write about what your experiences during the day. And every day, there's some things happen that trigger some emotions, some feelings. How do you feel about certain thing? How do you feel about doing really well at something or not doing well at something? And how do you process these emotions? Writing them down helps you. It's almost like a feeling of catharsis, like you pour everything out on paper, and it helps you understand, and maybe you learn something from that. So keeping a diary is a great way. It helps you, write. It gets you to write every day. And journaling in the sense, like a book review. All of you guys, I'm sure I see from what you're telling me, you'll read a lot. So how about, you review every book that you read, just write a synopsis of the book, then write about what you like, what you don't like, which are the characters you can relate to. This helps you review that. It builds your critical thinking skills, and that's really good if you want to be a writer. So that's one thing. And what else is important when you begin to write? Details are very important. So I'm going to read out 2 sentences, and then they are rewritten with details, and you can judge and see for yourself that what a big difference it makes. So something like, say, summer break started today. It's a sunny day, so I will go to the park. Now that's a sentence that works. It's grammatically correct. It has everything. You can't go wrong with it. But what if you wrote it this way? Yay, today is the first day of summer break. It's warm and sunny outside and the birds are chirping. I'm going to take my new red bike from the garage and go to Giro Park. Now, can you tell me what's the difference between the 2 sentences? And which do you like better? Yes, Samara.
Yes, the difference between the 2 sentences is the details. In one, it's using more of the adjectives and the verbs, what it's specifically doing. So, and I think that the second one is better with its details. It can also help you in visualization. And when
Exactly.
you're trying.
That's very important. I'm going to get to that, So the other sentence is, once a week on Friday, I go to town after school with my friends. We eat at different restaurants. Instead of that, you could write, I love Fridays. Once the bell goes off at the end of the last class, Eric, Matt, and I rush into town. We like to try out different restaurants. Eric loves sushi, but I like to have a pizza slice and iced tea at La Strada. Now, here there are so many details. You know that 3 people went to town, they go to town on Fridays and the bell goes off, and the feeling of rushing out is something we all remember from our school days. And what they like to eat. So, there are a lot of details going on, and you can visualize this. Okay, now I want all of you to maybe type out this. This is the sentence. I'm going for a movie with my friends. Can I have money for the tickets and snacks? So you guys can try writing, or you can just raise your hand and say how you would change it to add more details. Anyone?
I would probably add dialogue, probably, so then like you could see who you're talking to, like who you're asking. It could be your parents, it could be an uncle or aunt.
Yeah, I told my mom, I asked her for money, what else what other details could you add?
What friends
How
you're
about
going with.
who you're going with? Which movie are you going for, right? What are you seeing? Like, which movie are you going for? The Minions, have some money for the tickets and snacks, or you can have, to buy myself popcorn, or just some, yeah, Miss Khan?
Ma'am, I think that we can say that we can tell our friends names that we are going with Ridma, Anahita, Priyansh. We can go with anyone and we can tell the names of the restaurant we are going.
Yeah, and which movie are you going for, where? So yeah, you can add many details. So details are very important. Try and add more details, when you write. And now somebody said, right, I think it was Samara, that you can visualize in your mind. And that's very important. You need to have a sensory element to your writing, like you create visuals with your choice of words. For example, she squeezed the yellow lemon and the tart juice dripped into the tall jar filled with ice. Now, you can actually see somebody, you can visualize when you read a sentence like that, you can see the yellow lemon being squeezed, there's a jar full of ice where the juice is dripping into. So it creates a mental picture, and that's always a nice way of engaging your readers, by including more of these sensory elements. For example, here there's another sentence. She was sleepy and she walked slowly across the room. Now you could, reframe it in this way. Her eyelids drooped as she dragged herself across the room. So you can actually imagine like somebody who's sleepy, dragging herself across the room. So these are some of the ways in which you can make your writing more sensory. Okay, now you guys can try. So you have, he didn't want to be late, so ran to the train station. So he ran to the train station. Sorry, I missed out on a he here. He didn't want to be late, so he ran to the train station. Now, how would you rewrite this to create a mental picture in the mind of your readers? If you want to communicate a man who's late for work, he's running to the train station. So how would you convey the urgency, or, the fact that he's delayed, and how would a person behave and what could go wrong? Yeah, Sartaj, Pierce, you can go next.
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, in this sentence, he didn't want to be late, so ran to the train station. So, ma'am, I had converted it like he had a train to catch, so he ran to the train station.
Okay. What other details can you add to this? Pierce?
Excuse me, ma'am. Perhaps some like urgency, maybe like what is he going to be so late for? That could possibly.
He had a meeting, had a very important meeting. He didn't want to be late, so he ran to the train station, stumbling on the stairs as he, rushed to the platform. There are so many words that you can use to create the mental picture, of this guy. He probably spilled his coffee running and, ruined his suit for the meeting. Anything, it's open to interpretation. It's open to your imagination. So one thing that you can do to, vocabulary is very important for good writing. So with my students, I always tell them that learn every day, learn a new word. What is the word of the day? So learn a new word, and throughout the week, you can tell your family about it over dinner time, and you can ask them for the word that they learned and try and use that word in sentences in your communication. So this is how you can enhance your vocabulary, right? Instead of going through the dictionary, and you don't have to learn words which nobody uses, like the spelling bee words, but these are words like synonyms of common words that you use, so that when you write about something, you use different words, different synonyms through your writing, so it's not repetitive. Also, another great exercise is to work with word associations. So here I've say word like jealousy. So what do you associate? What are the words that come to your mind when you think of jealousy? So I have put down green, the green-eyed monster, vice, sin, intense, envy is a synonym. Jealousy is a dark emotion, so dark. I have two words for you guys. One is trees, since you guys are all into eco-activism, and the other is pandemic. It's something that's kind of defined our lives for the last 2 years, 3 years. So can you come up with some word associations for this?
For trees, you could put nature, since it's part of nature for trees.
Yeah, good.
And pandemic, you could put like maybe like masks, because that's what has to do with it, like with masks and stuff.
Yeah. What else? You need to come up with minimum 5. So, challenge yourself, not just one thing, but a lot of things. And that way you will be able to explore the different aspects of this word or this term Pandemic could be lockdown, not being able to see your family, travel. There are a lot of things that were affected, right? Online school, virtual learning. So explore, try and come up with more than 5 words. Always challenge yourself that, okay, what all can I associate with this? So you can examine a topic from various angles and aspects. And in your writing, you can cover all those different dimensions, add layers to your writing. So, all right, there's something else, these are figures of speech that you can use to make your writing more layered, more textured, and more interesting. So what are they? They are similes, metaphors, and symbols. So simile is when you compare direct comparison with something. So for example, she was as beautiful as a rose, while a metaphor is more of an implied analogy. Like, you use your imagination to identify one thing with another where there is no direct connection, and that makes it very interesting. And you're like, wow, I never thought of that. So simile is a direct analogy or direct comparison, it reinforces a theme. And what is a symbol? Anyone's read The Grinch? Watched the movie, sorry, The Grinch, Who Stole Christmas. Yeah, so in that, you see Grinch sitting in his lonely cave, and there is this reference to warm lighted windows, So what do the warm lighted windows stand for? So Grinch is lonely and he's looking into these warm lighted windows, everybody's celebrating, and he's just so irritable and doesn't like the spirit of Christmas. So warm lighted windows here stands for, family, coming together of people, warmth, the spirit of being together over holidays. So that becomes a symbol. In anybody's read Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yeah. So in that you find Huckleberry, Finn, and Jim, right? They escape from they run away from their town and they float for days on the Mississippi. They're going towards, they want freedom. Huckleberry wants to leave his alcoholic dad, and Jim is a slave, and Miss Watson wants to sell him, take him to New Orleans and sell him. So he's escaping from slavery, and they both come together on this river. So Mississippi River is almost like a character in the book. It's a river that divides America, between the states that it divides America. There are states that believe in slavery and are fighting to hold on to slavery, and those that want equality and end of slavery. So it's also a symbol of freedom because it is helping these two characters escape. And it is also freedom of the mind because Huckleberry Finn, sees Jim for the first time not as a slave, but as a human being, somebody who has feelings and somebody who cares for him more than his father did, right? So the river is a symbol here. So you can use these elements in your writing, Now, this is a great example of metaphor. As I said, simile is like as beautiful as a rose. Metaphor is an indirect comparison. So metaphors. It's from Macbeth by Shakespeare, a play, where he says, out, out, brief candle, life's but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So he's comparing life to a lot of things. He's calling it a brief candle, something that's going to go off soon. Life is short. It's another way of saying life is short. Life is but a walking shadow, means there is nothing really substantial to life. It's nothing tangible, it comes and goes. Life is a poor player. So it's a bad actor on stage who has few lines, comes, mumbles, fumbles, and leaves, and nobody sees that character again in the play. So life is like that. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. So it really has no deep meaning. So this is a person who's reflecting on life and the meaning of life. But, that's such a beautiful way of presenting that thought using metaphors. So you can use these literary devices to make your writing more interesting, more layered. Okay, now this is kiss and tell, two principles that you can keep in mind while writing. So now this kiss here is just KIS, as in keep it simple and tell a story. You don't need complex words, you don't need long-winded sentences, to convey your thoughts, to communicate with people. You can keep your communication very simple, brief, and be very effective. For that, you need the right tools, the right language. You need to construct your sentences and your writing in a particular way. And always tell a story in your writing, whether it's a history assignment or a research paper, you need to write it in a nice, organized way. You have to have a writing plan. You have to take all your ideas, your data, and organize it, lay it out neatly. It has to have a beginning, a middle, and end in expository assignments, writing assignments, right? You have a thesis statement, then you have a topic sentence, which is supported by evidence. And then you come back to the conclusion, you prove something and you conclude, right? You go back to your thesis statement. So having a plan, telling a story, and doing it in a simple way is important. Who's read The Little Prince by Antonio de Saint-Exupéry? Anybody? It's one of my favorite books, or it's like Animal Farm. It's written in a very, very simple manner, but it's a book that has a deep impact. And every time you read it, at every age, it means something different because there are so many layers to it. So in The Little Prince, there is this little prince who's an alien. He lives in an asteroid where there are just 3 volcanoes and some flowers, and he comes to Earth, and his observations of the Earth and what he tells the author, right? So that makes the author re-examine our own perception of our world, because he has very different insights. For example, he says, if you tell grown-ups, I saw a beautiful red brick house with geraniums at the window and doves on the roof, they won't be able to imagine such a house. You have to tell them, I saw a house worth 100,000 francs. Then they exclaim, what a pretty house. So this is an indirect way of saying, a simple way of saying that human beings are so materialistic. They do not see the beauty, but they are evaluating everything in terms of what it costs. And anyone seen this movie, Jojo Rabbit? Anyone? I think
Yes.
Yeah, I have. It's a good movie.
Yeah, it's a very good movie. I think
yes.
everyone should watch it because it tells you the story in a very simple way. It's a very simple way of seeing how the World War II is interpreted by this 10-year-old German boy, who starts off admiring Hitler. I mean, he always imagines Hitler being in his room and, having these conversations with Adolf Hitler. And his mother, who is, against this Nazi ideology, has a Jewish girl hiding in her basement. And when this boy meets her, Jojo, he asks her, what are Jewish people like? And she says, we are like you, but human, So it's such a simple statement. It's a short sentence, but it is very deep in its impact, that we are more human than, this ideology of hatred. We are all the same. We are just more human than you, and you don't recognize that humanity when you kill people, when you spread hatred. So now we come to a very important component of writing, which is grammar. So if you follow the rules of grammar, if your grammar is sound, your syntax, then your communication is effective. It is sound. And to see how grammar works, I like to give this example from Through the Looking Glass by Lewis Carroll. So that is a sequel to Alice in Wonderland, where he wrote this nonsense, a poem in nonsense words called Jabberwocky. So it says, "'Twas brillig and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves and the mome rats outgrabe." Now, no word here makes sense. And yet there is a structure to this poem because he's using the rules of grammar, right? Can you tell me what are the nouns, and can you tell me the action words over here, the verbs? If you read it, you'll know that there are verbs, there are nouns and adjectives here, even though the words are all nonsense words, they're not real words. Anyone? When you say
Gyre and gimbal would be
what?
Would be like verbs.
Yes. And mome rats probably are some kind of creatures, so noun. You have the slithy toes. So slithy is what? What do you think slithy would be? Toes. Toes would be a noun. Slithy is adjective. So even though nothing makes sense, you can still, there is some structure to it. So grammar, if your grammar is sound, your writing will be good, so focus on your grammar. Now, writing, now according to Aristotle, all writing, centers around these three principles. So either you appeal to ethos, pathos, or logos. So ethos appeals to writers' character, credentials, credibility. For example, I thought of Lorax, who speaks for the trees. He's called by the characters every time that the one slurp, fells a tree. He comes and tells him why it's because he works for this. He works to save the trees. Or another example would be, say, a doctor on CNN. Dr. Sanjay Gupta is giving you some health advice, as opposed to me coming and telling you, okay, you need to do this and then you'll be healthy. I don't have credibility. I'm not a doctor. So how to, the writer, either the writer is writing a book and he has the credibility to write it, or he has characters who are, he builds those characters to have those credentials to write. Then the second principle is pathos, where you appeal to a reader's emotions, imagination, and values. Anybody's read The Merchant of Venice here? By Shakespeare. So in that you have this villain who in the end gives a speech. Yes.
No, ma'am, I didn't want to say anything. I just raised my hand because you asked The Merchant of Venice, so I read it.
Yes, so Shylock, right? In the end, he gives the
Yes,
speech.
ma'am. He demands Antonio for his money.
Yes, he gives money to people. He loans out money. He's Jewish and he's shown as a typical stereotypical character. At that time, there were a lot of stereotypes. So he's shown as this person who thrives off interest. He's, cunning, he's greedy. But in the end, he gives a speech where you end up wondering, like, is he really a villain? Because he talks about how he has always been discriminated against. And this money is something that helps him, consolidate his position in society. And he says, if you prick a Jew, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? Now, again, he's appealing to emotions that we are also human. You need to treat us equally. When you don't do it, then you are provoking me to not do good things. If you are not being good to me, how do you expect me to be nice to you? So that in the end you end up wondering, my God, is this really a villain? Or so that is pathos. And logos is like appeal to reason. For example, has anyone seen To Kill a Mockingbird or read Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird? So,
yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so Atticus Finch is a lawyer, right? And he fights the case for this, African-American person who is falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit. And in the end, he proves it, in court. So that is logos. You're appealing to the reason, and even the readers, everyone in the court, the characters in the book, and we as readers, believe him, so that is appeal to reason. So your writing can include either an appeal to, or all of these, depending on what you're working on. So these are some of the, okay. Now, especially in fiction, what do you need? You need a plot. You can't just say, oh, there's a story and you just randomly writing. No, you need to plan it out. So you have the exposition. Like, okay, Harry Potter receives this letter, which tells him that he's been invited and that he's a wizard. Then what is a rising action? Rising action is when he goes to Hogwarts, he meets everyone, and all the problems that he has with Voldemort and Professor Snape. Then you have the climax where, the protagonist and the antagonist clash with each other, and it's something after the climax, it's like the action reaches its peak. And then there's falling action where things get resolved. Everything, resolution. There's a problem, there is a resolution, and the denouement is a resolution. It ends over there. So plot is important to storytelling. And what else is important? It's the characters. So your characters need to be relatable. They need to be memorable, quirky. So you have a protagonist and an antagonist. Like the best example I could think of is Tom and Jerry, right? Any other characters that you just remember from any book or movie that you've seen? Because even movie as script writing, there is a writing component to movies as well. Any characters that you remember just because they are so like quirky, they're just so unique? Any characters you can think of that are your favorite? Anyone?
I could think SpongeBob and Squidward. They're both like
Oh yes, I love SpongeBob and Squidward. So yes, they're very quirky, right? These two characters living in the bottom of the ocean and having this whole world over there. So yes, those are things that make you remember the characters. Okay, then there you have action, action words, as somebody said, these verbs, using the kind of verbs that conjure images, action words. For instance, you have a sentence like, she took her umbrella and went out, versus she grabbed her umbrella and rushed out the door. So here, grabbed and rushed, right? They convey the urgency. They show some kind of action. Like you can actually visualize this girl grabbing her umbrella and rushing out the door, versus she took her umbrella and went out. So use action words in your writing. It makes your writing more dynamic. Then you have active versus passive voice. So personally, I would recommend that most of the time you use active voice, because again, it makes your writing more dynamic. So the difference between the two, so you have the forest through which the boy ran was dark and dense. Now this is written in passive voice because you have the subject and the object, right? Versus like the boy ran through the dark and dense forest, versus the forest through which the boy, that's an indirect way of saying it. But be more direct, use an active voice. The boy ran through the dark and dense forest. What sounds better to you guys? The sentence, the second sentence written in active voice or the passive voice? So I personally think that, the active voice would be better. Now I'm going to leave you guys with, I know I've gone way past my time, but with this who, what, where, when chart, you can take words from any of these columns and build a story. This is something that you can do. You can just take a picture, or you'll get this, just write down what you want from here. You can match a tortoise, straw, beach, Wednesday, and build a story around it. So this is an exercise I do with a lot of my students, and it's a lot of fun, because you take all these who, monkey, and with a bat in a mall, Christmas time, and build a story around it. So you can try doing this, and you can have fun, be yourself when you write. let your personality shine through, read different authors, get inspired by them, use all your reading, writing to develop your own unique style, your own unique voice of, when you write. You can read different forms of writing, as I said, because we use different tones for newspaper versus, for a television show versus when you're talking, having a conversation with your friend and texting them. So there are different styles of writing. And as Dr. Sewell says, today you are you, that is truer than true. And there is no one alive who's youer than you. So be yourself, have fun writing, and you'll develop your own style. And good luck with your summer projects, everyone. Thank you. Any questions? Thank
you, Jahnavi. This was super informative, and I think it's a lot of information which we need to, I think, review again. So I think what I'll do is I will send the slides over and the recording over to everyone so that we can review on our time. But this was great. Thank you so much for
thank you, everyone.
You're sharing your time with us, Jahnavi. Now over to Odessa. Thank you, Odessa, for waiting so patiently.
I'm sorry I went, beyond.
No worries. I think this is a very good information for all of us. So I think it was good to get all the information together, and this definitely sets a great stage for us going forward with our story maps and story ideas. So I think it was good information, Jahnavi. Thank you so much for sharing those ideas.
Thank you for having me.
And we will certainly have questions, so we will not have time to take questions today, but definitely feel free to have those questions ready for next week, or we can obviously take the questions over email and then share it with you, Jahnavi. So our next panelist is Odessa Hott. She's the director of Finance Youth Climate Action Team. And I think she's so inspirational at such a young age. She is a climate activist and has gotten together with this group, is doing all she can to focus on climate activism locally. So she brings in this climate aspect and climate element so that we can all focus on taking the story aspect for raising our voices for climate. So Odessa is the best person to be with us and seeing how we can use all of these storytelling techniques to take climate discussions to another level. Odessa, over to you.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, let's see if I can put this in present mode. Let's see, oops. Let's see. I think there's a way for me to put it into full screen. Oh, here we go. Okay, hopefully, there we go. Awesome. Can everyone see that? Awesome. All righty, everyone. So yes, I am Odessa Hott. I am doing mostly local work in the climate advocacy movement, especially with young people like yourselves. So I'd like to start with an activity that I grew up using when I would experience something called writer's block. And you may be familiar with writer's block, but basically it's an annoying thing that happens when you are trying to write, you want to write something, but you just can't get anything out on the paper or whatever your writing tool of choice is. And you can't think of any ideas, but they are somewhere in there. And so this is a really helpful activity that I found useful to help me find those ideas and get them out of my head and onto the paper. So I'd like to do this with you. And so we're going to take 3 minutes to just write nonstop. And that means exactly what it says, nonstop, only lift your pencil or your fingers from your keyboard to write the next word. And so there really are no rules to this. You can write anything you want. You can start with an idea and just take it wherever. If you need to write blah, 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 or I don't know what to write, or whatever you need to write to get to the next word, write it. So I want to start a quick timer, and we'll just take 3 minutes to try this. And this will just be for you, so don't worry about grammar or punctuation or spelling or anything. And I will go ahead and get that timer set up. Awesome. All right, is everyone ready? Okay, 3 minutes start now.
Ma'am, can I just bring my diary and write in this? Write in that?
Yes, of course.
Ma'am, give me a one.
One more minute. All right, and that is 3 minutes. So wrap up your thoughts, get that last couple of words out. Awesome. So how did that feel? Did anyone write anything that they were surprised about? Or sometimes what happens with this activity is you just start writing and then you write something just by mere coincidence that you find really inspiring, and then you take that and write something, a longer form with that. So I'm curious to know how you felt about this activity. You can just write a quick comment in the chat, or if you'd like to. Yes, Rimsha.
Ma'am, I wanted to say that I write only one sentence. That is, I visualized that I was in a park. There were many swings and I had lots of fun there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Awesome. Anyone else? Oh, you wrote the weirdest thing ever. Sometimes that happens. Oh, and thank you for sharing your writing in the chat. Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much. And I think Samara wants to share.
While I was writing, I was actually surprised that so many thoughts kept coming out of my mind. Like that so many things were just is hidden inside it. When I wrote them, it felt like that like how did it happen? I didn't even used to speak these things in my, but after writing them, it was just clear after having them.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for sharing. Awesome. We have more comments in the chat. Alrighty. And Arpit, did you want to share?
Yes, ma'am. So while I was writing, so the words were automatically coming in my head. I was writing about my school today. How was my school, and it was so tiring. So I was a bit tired. So that's why. So, ma'am, it's a very cool exercise that we should do every day.
Great. Thank you. Right, and Vitat, did you want to share?
Yes, ma'am. I'm totally into science these days, and I love science, and I actually want to pursue being a scientist or anything related to science, even if it's an astrophysicist, a physicist, astronomer, or a scientist, whatever.
Great. That is very inspiring. I encourage you to pursue that. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Awesome. Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating and for sharing your work. Awesome. And I hope that this will be helpful to you in the future as well. Awesome. So we will move on. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the concept of art and activism. And I consider creative writing to be an art form. But sometimes people make a distinction between art as visual art, creative writing, music. They're all sort of separate. So I'd like to talk to you about something called movement art or artivism. And so first, I think there's a common misconception that climate change and sustainability advocacy are only for scientists. And while scientists are absolutely essential to these conversations and issues, sometimes artists and writers can feel that their work is unimportant to advocacy or that there isn't really a place for them in the advocacy space. Climate change, I think, is still mystical and daunting for a lot of people to learn about because it can be such a scary issue, right? And it can seem very complex and difficult to understand. But there is a place for everyone in the climate and sustainability movement. And this is a personal passion of mine as well, intersecting art and climate. So art and creative writing are absolutely essential to not only the climate movement, but also activism as a whole. And as Jahnavi talked about, art and creative writing can be used as tools to inspire people into action, which is incredibly important. So movement art, art activism, or my personal favorite term, artivism, is described as a dynamic practice combining the creative power of the arts to move us emotionally with the strategic planning of activism necessary to bring about social change. So again, art and creative writing are forms of activism. And when combined with other forms of activism, such as political revolution, or other types of activism that maybe you've seen or you're familiar with, art and creative writing can be used to make a powerful difference, a powerful statement. So do any of you enjoy making art, whether it's painting or sketching or music? You can share in the chat if you like. I personally really enjoy drawing fashion illustrations. Awesome. Tombi likes to paint. Great. Anyone else? Drawing, sketching and drawing. Awesome. Great. Oh, abstract art. That's awesome. Great. Yeah, well, I'm glad to see that many of you are interested in visual art as well. Great. So I want to show you a few examples of art activism. And so I'll use a specific example, the civil rights movement in America, which was mainly during the 50s and the 60s, the 1950s and the 1960s, but was active even as early as the early 20th century in the early 1900s. So art activism has been used throughout history even before this time. But this specific example, I think, is a great one to illustrate the power of art activism in a social movement. So some examples of art activism in the civil rights movement include music, stories, so creative writing, and folk art. So here are a couple of examples of visual art that are commenting on issues of the time. So this one on the left, The Door by David Hammons in 1969, is a commentary on the struggles faced by Black Americans during the desegregation of schools in the United States. And if you're not familiar with the term desegregation, it refers to the ending of a policy of separating people on the basis of race. So even during and after desegregation in schools, and Black and white people were allowed to attend school together, Black Americans still face discrimination and unequal opportunities. So artwork like David Hammons uses visual art to generate awareness about these issues and inspire people to learn and take action. And the only words used in this piece are admissions office. And so a lot of this could be up to interpretation, which I think is part of the beauty of visual art and using art for social change. And so the one on the right uses a bit more of visual wordplay. But this is by Barbara Jones Hogu, and she was a founding member of a collective called Afrocobra, and it was a collective of African-American artists who used the Black identity and its style, attitude, and worldview to foster solidarity and self-confidence throughout the African diaspora. So people whose heritage comes from Africa, but they may be from different geographical locations. So these are only two examples of artivism used in the civil rights movement specifically, but movement art of the time was diverse and plentiful. And so I encourage you to explore this more on your own and find art pieces that speak to you, whether it is from the civil rights movement or from another movement that you're passionate about, such as the climate movement. So I'm sure several of you are interested in climate. And so these are just a few examples of artivism in the climate movement. And as you can see, there are a few different types of art here. And so the first one is a painting that uses color and texture to illustrate emotion, right? And illustrate some of the issues of climate change, such as pollution and the disproportionate effects on Black communities that climate change has and will only continue to have, right? So that is a very powerful statement without the use of any words and still allows for interpretation based on the viewer. The second one is digital art, and maybe this looks similar to things that you've seen online or on social media, and uses words to make a point of what's already being shown visually. So making a point of how you can implement sustainable practices in your own life, like saying no to plastic straws and bringing your own bag to the grocery store and supporting brands that are friendly to the environment, right? So these are just another form of using visual art and text to create change. And one of my personal favorite ways of creating movement art is through signs at protests or rallies, like this one, the Youth Choose Climate Justice, that uses color and visual art to help people remember a message. And taking care of your earth, that's another great example of using art and using color to help people remember the message you want to share. So these are also ways of storytelling through visual art, and they're very, very important. And as you research and explore this on your own, you'll find many examples of different types of ways to share art that drive social change. So I encourage you again to do some research on your own. So you might be wondering then, where does creative writing really fit in art activism? So both the civil rights movement and the climate movement have many, many writers and have had many, many writers throughout the movements that are still influential to creating change. So here are just a few examples, and this is very, very few, but these are people who you may be familiar with or you may not. But Ida B. Wells was a journalist and civil rights activist in the early days of the civil rights movement. So in the early 1900s, she passed away in the 30s, the early 30s. But she was writing about issues of Black liberation and Black struggles. And so I think it's important to remember that creative writing is very diverse and isn't only limited to what we might typically consider creative writing, such as fiction or fantasy or poetry. There are lots of different types of creative writing that tell powerful stories. Maya Angelou is another great example. She was a poet and a memoirist and also a civil rights activist. And you may be familiar with her poem called Still I Rise that talks about being Black in America. And so that's a very powerful poem that has been used many times to support social justice movements and to inspire people to learn and take action. I highly recommend searching that poem and even listening to her speak the poem herself. Another writer is Carl Hyacin, who wrote and is still writing young adults novels and stories about the environment. So that's a slightly different take on writing for the climate. Harriet A. Washington is a medical ethicist, so she writes about the ethics of the medical field, but also she writes about environmental racism. And environmental racism refers to the disproportionate effects on primarily Black and Indigenous people of color and their communities, marginalized communities. And so these are, again, just a very few examples of people who are writing for social change and telling stories through creative writing. So, wrapping up today, both visual art and creative writing have many, many advantages. And these are just a few that came to mind for me while I was thinking about the differences between visual art and creative writing, but also the similarities between the two. And I'll ask you also to think of a few and maybe put them in the chat or raise your hand and share with everyone. But here are just a few that I think are really powerful aspects or attributes of both visual art and creative writing. I think visual art is very powerful in helping individuals and visual learners, especially. I'm also a visual learner, so it really helps me when I'm digesting information or taking in new information to have a visual aid to help me remember that message. So if you think back to when we were talking about, protest signs and digital art that, shows sustainability practices, those all have visual aids to help people understand and process information. So visual art is a very powerful way to help people process and understand and connect emotionally with issues. It can engage people regardless of language barriers. So you and I may not speak the same language, but we may look at a painting and understand the meaning behind it, regardless of whether we speak to one another or not. Visual art can also convey thought-provoking messages and stimulate conversation between individuals. And conversation and dialogue are incredibly important to life in general, but also to activism and hearing what other people have to say and hearing their stories. So creative writing can also do that. It can stimulate conversation. Your story can inspire someone else as well as their story can inspire you. And talking to people about each other's stories is a powerful way to learn about other people, to learn about different issues, and to become well-informed about lots of different types of movements and activism efforts between different people. It can also communicate ideas to different kinds of people. So one person's way of storytelling may not speak to you as much as someone else's form of storytelling. And that doesn't make one good or bad. It just means that it communicates to you in a different way. And so the power of different writers and different people's ideas is incredibly impactful. And so that's why, you always hear people saying to read, right? Read lots of different authors and lots of different stories. And it sounds like all of you are doing just that and reading lots of different types of stories, which is great. And so here's a parallel or similarity, another similarity between visual art and creative writing is that it creates or conveys thought-provoking messages, right? It makes you think about what you're reading or what you're seeing, and may make you think about your own perspective on a specific issue that may or may not be the same as what the author or the artist originally intended. And so that's how we create social change, by thinking for ourselves and thinking about, what we are seeing, what we're reading, and thinking critically about that. And bringing new perspectives to the table, like your perspective, is really important as well. So are there any other types of benefits or advantages to visual art or creative writing that you can think of? I see some comments in the chat. Art makes our world colorful and even makes us more creative. Yes, definitely.
Vidharth has his hand up.
Yes, please share.
Ma'am, actually, about a month ago, I had taken part in an art competition related to Jose Marti. It was he was a Cuban activist, and we had to make a painting as his birthday was round the clock.
Interesting. That's great. So what did you submit?
I would have to share my screen.
Oh yeah, you can describe it. Was it a painting or a collage or?
It was a painting.
A painting. Excellent.
A poster.
Great. Great. That's awesome. Well, I hope you won.
I was selected.
You were selected. That's great. Congratulations. Congratulations. That's very powerful. I'm glad to hear that you're
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else would like to share? Adana, yes.
As for me, I think art is actually an expression, and it can be either pleasant or it can provoke questions. Yes. And that is something which is really important. And so in a way, it is also communication. Like you can speak to yourself, you can speak to others regarding it. And in fact, you can spread the question to the entire world. And I think that really makes a difference. So for me, art is not just, paintings and sketches and etc. Art is your own expression, and it can be either writing or visual art, etc.
Yes, very powerful. Thank you for sharing that, Adana. Samara, how about you?
Yes, for me, art is like it's like a world itself. It is like awakening your curiosity, and it's like your expressions come to life in it, and it's showing how to present your emotions or create things. Like art is able to change the world in many different forms. It's just choosing the right one which can help you to do it. Like that, there's that spirit in it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. Yes. Thank you everyone for sharing and for listening to my presentation and for thinking about the ways that visual art and creative writing can impact advocacy and activism positively. And so as I leave you today, I would love for you to think about how visual art and creative writing impacts your own life and your own activism, and how you can use art or creative writing to tell your story, to tell someone else's story, or to talk about the issues that you care about. So with that being said, thank you so much for having me, for listening. And I'm so excited to see where each of you go next.
Thank you so much, Odessa. This is really wonderful, and what a great compliment to Jahnavi's presentation on the skills, and then you bring in the Artism part and link it to climate. So I think it was wonderful to see how technical skills can be matched with current topics that can move, can create like a lot of movement around climate related issues locally. So that was really wonderful. Maybe just one or two questions from everyone, if there are any, for our guest speakers, and then we'll wrap it up, because I know it's little late, and especially for folks joining in India, it might be late in the evening. Any questions, anything that you are thinking of any, also any inspiration that you got on how you could use art and either creative writing or art forms in your work, or in your, or at least, think about or focus on thinking about how you can use art in your different ways of expression going forward. Betsy, yes, Ms. Freeman.
So I have a question, and first I'm going to say, Jahnavi and Odessa, thank you. I think I'm really curious about each of your journeys and your backgrounds that brought you to take, creative skills and bring them to bear on something that is considered kind of technical, like whether or not it really is, like climate change. And I think that would be helpful for a lot of the kids to be able to like follow your path as well, or envision the path for themselves.
Sure, I can go first. Well, so I am 20. I am about to go to university as a sophomore. And so I only really learned about climate change in the last 5 or 6 years. I wasn't at all involved in the climate movement. I was doing other things. I was, mainly focusing on writing because I grew up creative writing and reading, and that was like my whole thing. And music and fashion and the creative arts were really my passion. And so I attended a rally that a friend had hosted about climate change at the governor's mansion in Virginia, where I'm from. And so before that time, I'd never really, I knew about it. I knew the basics, like polar bears and ice caps were melting. And I just knew the very basics of climate change. But going to that rally really sparked an interest in climate change for me. And so I joined a youth-led organization called Virginia Youth Climate Cooperative, and became the director of the Student Ambassador Program there eventually, and was really trying to involve other young people in climate activism, especially people who may not have a lot of time to give, or who may think that, climate change wasn't really a place for them to be involved in, or that the conversation wasn't open to them. So really trying to remove those misconceptions that young people can't be involved in the climate space. And then I moved on to where I am now at Youth Climate Action Team, where we are really trying to educate young people about climate change, and we host lobbying events to help young people really advocate for the issues they care about. So I wasn't always doing this. All of that to say that this is I'm still new to this, relatively new to this, and I'm always learning. And so I think that's an important mindset to maintain as you go through, whatever issues you care about, that there's always something new to learn. And there's always someone that you could learn something from. And so I think that really ties into the topic of storytelling and listening to other people's stories as well. And being inspired by that to inform your own story and your own journey. So yeah, I'm continuing on to do lots of other things, hopefully, but I'm very happy where I am now, doing finance work for Youth Climate Action Team. But yeah.
Thank you, Odessa. I think Janvi is having some technical issues. Janvi, can you hear us? Maybe I've asked her to log back again. She can't seem to, her screen is frozen. But maybe she'll come back again. But that was a very good, inspiring story, Odessa. Maybe a lot of us can follow your footsteps and see where our passion takes us. Thanks for that question, Ms. Freeman. Great. So I think with the interest of time, unfortunately, we'll have to end the session today, but next week, please join us again for another session where we will take these skills and transform it into story maps. And we'll learn what those story maps are as we go along. And there'll be some other pedagogical tools, teaching tools. Teaching tools are not just for teachers. So I think we can all learn from these tools and teach ourselves, teach others, so that we can all be in this journey together. So thank you for joining. I will share this PowerPoint and I will share this recording with everyone who have registered. Use our Eventbrite link to register for our following events. I hope you all have it. And if not, I can share that again. This is my email in case if you don't have it, you can definitely email me and I can get back to you on this. But it was lovely having you here. I learned a lot and I hope you all did also. And we'll continue this summer journey as we go along to see how we can use all these skills, learn all these skills and use it in our passion, to drive our passion, whatever it is. I think it's great that we are learning together and learning about some really helpful skills as we go along. Great. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you all next Friday. There's a different time, but if you can't make it on that time, I'll definitely share the video as we go along, the video recording.
Thank you, everyone. I shared my
Thank you,
contact
ma'am, for these
information.
lovely presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the
Thank you.
inspiring session. That is it.
Yes, ma'am.
Nice.
So much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, ma'am.
Bye.
Bye, ma'am.